Welcome to Some Dare Call It Conspiracy. I am Brent Lee.
And I'm Neil Sanders.
And I'm Greg Hall. Welcome to Movie Night.
Why are we here today?
Oh dear. You made us watch a terrible film.
Yeah, I don't know who we're blaming here, but someone
me.
sent in the group chat the motherload of Red Pill documentary.
Yeah, that was me.
Didn't you watch it and it got you really angry? And so you were like, right, I've got to inflict this on the other two.
Yeah. Yeah. I sent a message to you and I was like, I've just watched this. I am so angry. Plandemic 3, The Great Awakening. Oh my God. I was so annoyed and I had to let it off on you. And I was like, you know what? I think we should do this as a movie night.
Yeah. Like, interestingly, when I was watching it, I was about sort of 5-10 minutes into it, and I was like, there's a lot going on in this. I wonder if we should do a deep dive of this, because, you know, it does make a lot of claims. But luckily, it just continuously makes the same claims over and over again. So after about 10 minutes, it was like, no, we really don't know. We could probably do this on the back of a napkin. Oh dear. I was slightly concerned that because it was number 3, that I was not going to understand the plot. Because
there was no fear at all, because it had no real plot, to be honest.
Well, it has secret plots and communist plots.
Yeah, true.
Like, but no sort of narrative. Like, well, yeah.
The twisting the narrative.
Well, this is what was like slightly got me about it, was because Chapio, what's his name? Mikki Willis, is that the name that? Right, the director. He obviously did Plandemic 1 and Plandemic 2. Plandemic 1 is Judy Mikovits's story, isn't it? That basically, they I think the long and short of it is COVID isn't actually that harmful, and the vaccines are the ones that actually are dangerous. And basically, she says that all sort of diseases is it XRMV or something? This mice virus that she became obsessed with because she thought that it was the cause of what's the thing? What's it called?
MECFS.
Thank you. That's the thing. And she was doing, with great intention. She was actually sort of trying to get to the bottom of it, wasn't she? And she'd been hired by this incredibly wealthy couple who were impressed by her, which she was working in a bar at the time. It's almost like a sort of Human League song or something. Like, she was working at a bar and she met this really wealthy couple, and essentially their daughter was ill, and they hired her to do all sorts of research to try and find out if she could, get to the bottom, hopefully even sort of move towards a cure. And she became convinced that the cause of it was this mice virus called XRMV or XRMV, I believe it is. I may have got that wrong. But the long and short of it is that for a time, everybody was like thrilled about this. And unfortunately, what happened was when they tried to replicate her studies, they found that they just could not find the same results. And they went and looked back at her paper, and it looks kind of like basically some of the experiment might have got contaminated, because they had mice in the laboratory. They were working on those particular types of viruses and such like that in the mice, or they're prevalent in the mice. There was a potential chain of evidence, essentially, that was like, we think we know what's happened here. However, if you can replicate the studies, we find out that basically that's not the case, go for it. She was never able to show the same results, and there was a bit of a falling out with people, and she ended up getting into a bit of bother because she ended up going back and trying to get her research, which was on a laptop and a notebook. This was considered laboratory property at the time. So she was briefly imprisoned, and I don't think she was ever, I don't think she might have been briefly charged, but I don't think she was actually convicted of anything, was she? All went away. But essentially, her paper was retracted, and she felt rather sort of smited by the industry, and by sort of previous patrons and stuff like that. And she kind of set up this whole sort of thing where, for some reason, I forget the exact details. It's some really spurious link, like Fauci worked at the organisation that rebutted her paper or something like that. So when sort of COVID came around, she had this right bee in her bonnet against the industry and against Fauci and such like that. And she decided to basically tell people that this was the cause of it, that XMRV, this mice virus, was the cause of COVID. And the first Plandemic is ridiculous. Does it include all the stuff about, like, don't wear masks because you'll poison yourself with your own germs wearing masks and ludicrous crap like this? And anyway, Mikki Willis, the guy who's the director, he's also cross with Fauci because essentially his older brother, I believe, died of an AIDS-related illness, and he blames it on the medication, AZT. Now, AZT was... have you ever seen that, either the stage play or the TV series, Angels in America? It's about Roy Cohn. It's absolutely amazing. It's brilliant. Everyone should watch it. It's who else is in it? The guy who's in all the Annabelle films, the bloke that plays the Warren fellow, he's in it, and Al Pacino's in it. And he plays Roy Cohn. It's absolutely amazing. But in that, they talk about how Roy Cohn managed to get a huge amount of this AZT, which was like really, really difficult to get hold of. Like it was, there's various schools of thought, one which is real and one which is conspiratorial. Like it's not, I don't believe it's used anymore because I think they found that there were better medicines and such like that. And I think there were in some cases, some very, very bad side effects, but overwhelmingly it's been shown that basically it helped extend people's lives, and it wasn't, it wasn't killing people, because there is a conspiracy theory that basically the AZT was what was killing people, and that either HIV doesn't exist, or it isn't actually that harmful, or it doesn't lead to AIDS. There's various sort of flavours of this lunacy. And that what was always sort of spoke about in the conspiracy world was that AZT battled AIDS by eating away at your DNA. And so I think it was the sort of burning down the house to sort of get rid of the burglars type thing. Whether that's, I don't believe that's true. Or I think it's vastly misunderstood if there's even any element of truth to it. But essentially, Mikki Willis has got to be in his bonnet that his brother succumbed to AZT, and because Fauci was the director of the CDC or whatever he was, director of health at the time, he's had a grudge against Fauci since the 80s, just like Judy Mikovits.
It's also the plot of Dallas Buyers Club.
Oh, is that what Dallas Buyers Club is about? Them getting AZT?
Yes.
Because it was so difficult to get hold of. Right. Okay, that makes sense. Like, again, it was, let's say when it was first sort of achieved, because at the time AIDS was so destructive, and, it was considered an almost certain death sentence, that the availability of any of these drugs was, people were willing to pay and such like that, and there just wasn't really enough to go around. So it's a bit of it's one of those really rather distasteful sort of like conspiracy theories, really, because it's just like, well, I mean, the whole thing is, the whole anti-vax stuff and that as well, isn't it? But like this sort of AIDS denial and anti-AIDS sort of thing is really taking it to the next degree. Anyway, so Mikki Willis has got this bee in his bonnet about Fauci, and also, as we discovered, because he was the subject of one of John Ronson's recent podcasts, he's obsessed with this thing called The Hero's Journey, which was designed by an author called Joseph Campbell. I think there's 12 stages. I don't know that all the stages. You guys might. Essentially, it's this plot of Star Wars. You've got a reluctant hero who basically is told that he's a hero but doesn't want to do it. Something forces him into becoming a protagonist. There's something called a supernatural stage where basically they get sort of a sort of almost Deus Ex Machina sort of help. they'll go along, they'll get some success, they'll lose a significant battle in the third act, and that'll sort of rile them up to really sort of become the hero at the end. So if you've seen the plot of any Van Damme film or any Star Wars film or anything like that, that's what the protagonist does. This is the other thing that Joseph Campbell came up with.
Yeah, he. I should say, because I teach screenwriting, so Joseph Campbell's hero's journey is like a fundamental of storytelling. So it was originally in a book called A Hero with 1,000 Faces, and it was what he called a monomyth. So he looked at kind of storytelling from around the world, from like Aboriginal kind of storytelling through to like European fairy tales, and kind of worked out that every story fundamentally has this same thing, which is kind of what you said, Neil. It's about a hero. There is a problem. They need to fix that problem. They go out and fix it and come back a changed person. And Joseph Campbell and called George Lucas like his favourite student. They actually knew each other. And when George Lucas was writing, it like the draft was like 300 pages. And then once he kind of came across Joseph Campbell's model, he used that. And a lot of films, there was a writer called Christopher Vogler who used to work at Disney, and he kind of, once he discovered Joseph Campbell, like Disney went mad. And so everything from like The Lion King to Aladdin, all of them follow this idea of the protagonist and this journey. And you're dead right, like this entire film is kind of the whole angle of it, from like his brother dying of the AZT drug, and this whole thing about his mother. There was like this really resentful. He kind of like, there was a lot of subtext here and a lot like unexplored trauma, I think, because he was like he mentioned his mother knowing the difference between a hand up and a hand out. Like he was really resentful that she was on like benefits, and
yes.
then he then mentioned that she died from going through like chemotherapy, and it's literally the stuff about his mother, the stuff about his brother, all of that was just kind of establishing his politics. And the whole thing, he tried to angle it that it was about him going on this journey.
Yeah.
But there was
it didn't
no
really work,
real...
did it? No.
No.
Like
it was a good Act 1 setup, but there was no journey.
Yeah. No, he just really, I thought that as well. Like, but yeah. I do like the idea of that with the Disney thing, though. I've got this brilliant idea. We're going to do this hero's journey. Like, we're going to do that. Like, brilliant. And the executive just sat there and goes, is there any way we could spice it up? Could you kill all their parents at the beginning, too? You could. Brilliant. Then, I think we're in business. And, yeah. I mean, that's interesting as well, because, like, a lot of the time, like with the Lion King and stuff like that, they say, like, he's ripping off Hamlet. Or the narrative is Hamlet or whatever. Is that really just because? No, it's not. It's the same plot that is, ubiquitous to everything, essentially.
Stories only really work fundamentally if there's a character, a protagonist that has a problem that they need to fix. And we live through that, and that is a framework how we kind of view the world as well, I would say, story narratives. So like, the hero's journey isn't just the Hollywood films we consume. It's also how we, especially through conspiracy theories, center ourselves as being the hero trying to unlock or work out and figure out all the problems of the world.
Yeah, totally.
Not even conspiracy theories, just any sort of activism.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's true too, yeah. Well, he's most obvious, I was going to say, in like the QAnon sort of stuff, because you're literally involved in a sort of ongoing online investigation and stuff like that. So you are, that. But as you both say.
I mean, there's an argument that is kind of, and I kind of believe this as well, that it's almost imprinted within our DNA. Like, if you think about it, when we go from like being inside a womb to actually coming out of the womb into the real world, that is actually one of the most monumental journeys. And you're almost going from a place of like darkness, going through this Act 2 journey into this new world. So you could say actually we're kind of imprinted with an idea of a narrative journey. And certainly it's not just conspiracy theories. I would say it's all culture.
And it also sort of I don't want to get too dark too quick, but it's sort of like, if you can put a narrative structure, it sort of like makes sense of this pointless debacle.
All it is in this film is just a device.
Well, I meant life, actually.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if we see ourselves as having narrative structures of something to achieve and something to do, it stops you from going, this is fucking pointless, this, isn't it?
It stops you from having an existential crisis. I mean, Alan Moore, the writer, often talks about how we use like narratives because of the chaos of the universe. Yeah, it brings meaning and it brings poignancy. And, that's us as humans. That makes us, we are producers of culture and art in some respects. So, yeah, it is part of who we are.
Ah, cool. So one was about Judy Mikovits. Two, I didn't see. If I'm brutally honest, I don't know if it's any good. I don't know if it went completely left, like Nightmare on Elm Street 2, and then it picked back up in 3, like Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Like, I don't know. And we'll never know because I'm never going to watch it. So we'll just have to, I might look at the Wikipedia thing and see what it says. I imagine it's more batshittery, basically. But yeah, so Plandemic 3, The Great Awakening. It was called The Great Awakening as well, wasn't it? Is that the subtitle?
Yep.
That's very mid, isn't it? Like, do you know,
there's nothing new in it, is it?
No, and it's not even relevant to the film. Okay, because there's no awakening. There's no sort of people coming round to things or anything like that in the film. They lay out some stuff, and very soon it becomes clear, like, oh, I recognise some of this, and then sort of pops up, and we go, oh, right, it's that then. But anyway, but there is no sort of awakening in the film. So, do you know what I mean? Like, it's not, the title isn't really relevant.
Unless it's his own awakening, which happens, like he explains in the first few minutes.
Possibly, yeah. That might be it.
There is the whole kind of final act where it's like, what should we do to fix this problem? But I think you're right, Brent. It, like, again, coming back to that personal bit, as well as the mother and the brother, the other main thing was like this Bernie Sanders. Like, he was involved in Bernie Sanders' campaign. Yeah. And I found this one of the weirdest moments, because he basically says he didn't know anything about socialism or democratic socialism. And it's the guy, it's like, I was sat there going, wait a minute, have you just admitted that you're really stupid?
They do that a couple of times in the film, actually.
Without a doubt, yeah.
Is it stupid or is it naive?
No, there's one bit that I've got, they're definitely, like, that they explicitly call themselves and the audience stupid by mistake, which is perhaps an indication that they are actually stupid. But that's really interesting what you said, Brent, about the fact that the awakening is his awakening, which happens right at the beginning of the film, which says to me, take it on board with the fact that basically, as Greg pointed out, there's no arc. Like, the film is, like, in his mind, done within the first 5 minutes, which indicates to me that he's a massive narcissist, which was obvious from, like, the first film, but he's basically got his, like, this is it, this set up my awakening, blah, blah, blah. And then he's gone, shit, we've only got 5 minutes there. Fuck, right, okay, we need to tag some stuff. Is there any way we could tag an hour and a half of other stuff on the back of that? And then it sort of starts to tell the story and whatnot. But, very bizarre.
When I watched this, just before, I just wanted to say one thing. There is one way I think this film could be genius. I want to add this as a caveat at the start, okay? If, like, when you mix films, there's different audio tracks. And I wished if they took out all the dialogue, so everyone said, if you took that out and watched this film only with the music track, I think it would be like watching a horror film. It would be such a ride, but it'd be so surreal, and it would be much more of an interesting experience. You would still come away pumped full of fear and emotively, like, a breaking point. You'd get exactly the same thing, but it would actually be way more enjoyable than listening to what the people are saying. So I just wanted to add that caveat at the start.
Well, that's certainly true, but one of my notes is, the score is overblown melodramatic bollocks. like, which I think adequately it was all swelling strings and everything was like, oh Christ, like it was really like they were really selling it, weren't they? Or trying to sell it, basically.
And I guess this is where, like, when we talk about documentary, like what we have to kind of like put into context is like all filmmaking, whether fiction or non-fiction, is all about manipulation. Yeah. And documentaries themselves they don't just show truth. They don't just show reality. Like, there's different modes of documentary, like how they're constructed. And this is a complete manipulation from beginning to end. It's an overload. The music is, at some points, it's so on the nose and so cliche and cheesy. But, like, these guys, like, claim, like they say at the start, history is a lie agreed upon. And it's just, like, really ironic, because then it spends, like, 90 minutes
lying to you.
History, yeah.
Absolutely, man. It's like, yeah, it is such a ridiculous thing. But, right, so right from the start, we know it's going to be crap, because it opens with this sort of really sort of like shifted, sneaky appeal to unity, where it basically says something along the lines of, I don't care what political party you are, what race you are, what vaccine status you are. And this is obviously rubbish, because the next hour and 40 minutes, it is basically dedicated to slagging off one particular political ideology. Like, so I'm not sure that they would be like that sort of, that sort of open to it. And then it starts talking about, oh, well, I did this and blah, blah, blah. And you're right. This really bizarre thing where he's almost like resentful of his mum. And I've put here, oh my Christ, this is his story, isn't it? And then I've put a note a bit later with an arrow going back to it, saying, no, it's not. It's much worse than this. He's just some sort of massive narcissist. So, yeah, you know. But, yeah, it starts going on about how his mother was dependent on government assistance. And I immediately wrote a note, which may have been prescient, and said, I'm getting anti-commie vibes here.
Boy, were you in for like, it definitely went anti-commie, yeah.
Well, yeah. He starts talking about this thing about the trap of welfare. And this started sort of, there's a degree of truth to this, right? Okay, in as much as basically, if you provide somebody with a safety net, they don't have the necessity to go out and necessarily get a job, because they won't starve to death. Now, personally, I'm in favour of that. I'm more in favour of like, okay, fine, fair enough. So it might encourage some people that don't want to sort of like, or cannot better their situation to do that. Fine. There's enough money and enough resources in the world to do that. Like, I don't agree with, no, they should earn that. They should starve to death. They don't have the gumption to pull themselves up with their bootstraps like I did after a small loan from my father. Then, like, do you know what I mean? It's always that attitude, and this is ridiculous. So this trap of welfare it's a very, very right wing idea, and it speaks to sort of concepts of sort of hierarchies of people, and it implies that basically, if you're on welfare or you're taking benefits of any kind, the two things: one, that's a bad thing, which it isn't, and two, that somehow your fault, which is not the way to think of such a system. Are there some people that want to just like go, fine, I don't want to work, I'll just take this and blah blah blah? Yep, fine, fair enough, whatever. Like that's cool. But this idea that it somehow sort of encourages laziness. You know what encourages laziness? Inherited wealth. Like, I've met some lazy people in my time, right? Okay. And you know, the people that basically like are forced to do two shitty jobs in order to sort of get themselves out of a naff estate or something like that. Okay. I found that they're usually and always, in fact, like far more go-getters than the people that basically like, oh, I'll go on the gap year because Daddy and Marta said that we could do it this year. And I'm going to be a charitable worker in South America because I spoke to Tarquin and he just said it was marvellous. Like, bollocks. Like, these nonsense. And it's a really nasty sort of concept. So immediately I was quite sort of worried that this film was going to be not something that was to be aspired to. And then he starts talking about how all cancer treatments should be avoided and are toxic. And I thought, oh Christ, this is, and he ties it in again with his mother. And it's interesting what you said earlier, Greg, because it's almost like he's blaming his mum. Like, do you know what I mean? He had a real chip on his shoulder. Maybe that, like, you know, there's something more to that. Maybe he got picked on because his mum was on welfare or whatever. But we don't know his circumstances. He never explained why or what happened, other than didn't his dad sod off quite early or something, and he obviously had brothers. So, you know, I don't know. It seems like one of these things where, you know, if you picked at it a bit much, the anger that he's probably got, I mean, I don't want to speculate, but I'm gonna, like, the anger that he's got for his father that is absent cannot be directed, but, you know, it can be directed at somebody who...
Fauci.
Well, A, Fauci, but B, his mother. And because basically several things. One, you're comfortable directing the anger at your mum because she's doing all these things to support you, which psychologically tells you that she loves you and she cares for you, which means that you can push her as far as you want and she won't abandon you like that shit, which means that you can vent all this stuff at her. Then she dies. Then she dies and abandons him. And, you know, so I can get it. I totally understand the position that you might be coming from, but it does seem to me that this man has got a lot of misdirected anger in his life. And then he starts talking about basically that his brother died, and he puts it to AZT, the treatment for AIDS. And so now he's got another place to direct his anger, and another sort of, don't get me wrong, this guy's been kicked in the balls by life like a series of times, if this backstory is true. And it seems only normal and to a degree natural that, like, people would be looking for people to blame. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he's doing the right thing here, because it seems to me like that he's a very angry guy, and he wants to blame somebody.
And it's so interesting, like how you said, like in the opening with this whole, like, whatever political party you identify with, you belong here, vaccinated, unvaccinated, it almost sets itself up as being really open and almost liberal, a middle ground, and then straight away goes into planting the seeds.
Yeah, and shitting on people on welfare. And
yeah.
Those idiots that die.
It leads to this whole, like, individualism versus collectivism in, like, the third act, and that is really, like, there's no sense. It doesn't believe in any solidarity amongst human beings. So
very much no.
It really does just poison the wealth, right? Of, like, looking down and criticizing people, even though it tries to make out it's completely open and welcoming.
Well, absolutely, and it's interesting though, because the sort of the welfare thing, you know, famously, sort of the welfare state is also tied in with, you know, concepts of free healthcare and trade unions and things like this, and so there might be a bit of a hint as to why, for whatever reason, this guy is so anti the welfare state, basically, and it is confirmed straight away because. Gangster Edward Griffin comes on the screen and starts talking about a world communist plot. And at this point, we're like, bloody hell, this is it. And Brent, you pointed out something really interesting that nobody's spotted. Nobody's spotted in the sort of the conspiracy world. Nobody's spotted in the debunker world. And that is the role of Gangster Edward Griffin.
Yeah, absolutely. This guy is literally, I've been looking for this for a while. And I think I found it. And he is the missing link between the John Birch Society and the modern day conspiracy movement.
Oh, very much so. I mean, like, yeah, absolutely. We always thought that it was Alex Jones, right? Because we spotted the John Birch thing. The John Birch is the people that basically started the idea of this world communist plot. Well,
let's go back. It's actually Nesta Helen Webster who starts the communist plot, but he starts to do it as well, and he actually starts selling Nesta Helen Webster's books.
Robert Welch did?
Yes, the John Birch Society, they started distributing Webster's books,
Oh,
So she was from like the 20s or whatever. Then in the 50s, he comes along and yeah, they start publishing her books. So like it's a direct link.
so that's where he gets it from, basically.
Yeah.
Right, because, I mean, the John Birch Society, just to give you an idea of the sort of things that they're into, they massively oppose collectivism of all types, by which they basically just mean, you know, team spirit, anything that's not just based solely on the individual, the crab bucket stabbing people in the back mentality. For some reason, they're opposed to that, which is quite ironic because they are a society. But you know, you can't have everything. They also are opposed to communism and big government, and they were genuinely sort of concerned of a world Illuminati plot. Sometimes they say it's Jewish, certain people do.
I'll be fair to Robert Welch. He always said it's not a Jewish plot. It's the insiders.
Yes.
So that sounds like the Jews to me.
Yeah, you know. And they're also sort of, well, I'll put it this way, okay. They oppose any type of big government, and they thought that the world sort of the communist plot was tied in with notions of Satanism as well. And there is this concept that was sort of runs parallel about the synagogue of Satan and stuff like that. And the society has been accused of being very, very anti-Semitic. They're also they were openly racist in as much as they supported segregation and actively opposed the civil rights movement in all forms. They just did not like that at all.
Anything you think of like the culture war today, that was them.
Well, this is the thing. Like, you know, Alex Jones's parents were John Birch, and I think his grandpa and stuff like that. Basically, they also oppose immigration. They want to dismantle the Federal Reserve. They think that basically any sort of combined trade organization or trade agreement, or any organization like the UN, NAFTA, NATO, anything like that, is a step towards a one world government. Ironically, NATO is there to combat communism or communist Russia, but let's not get bogged down in facts. They also see things like drugs, abortion, divorce, homosexuality, feminism, and pornography as symptoms of the moral decline of the West. So, as Brent's just pointed out, like the roots of the culture war, every single thing in the culture war actually came through the John Birch Society via three sort of outlets, essentially. One was the Tea Party movement. Four, actually. One was the Tea Party movement. One was Roger Ailes' Fox News, who basically wanted to promote attitudes that were connected to the Tea Party movement. The third is the Heritage Foundation, which was founded in the 1980s by Paul Weyrich and the Koch brothers and people from the Cause family, who are all members of the John Birch Society. And it was Paul Weyrich that founded the phrase cultural Marxism, which is sort of became a very sort of large part of the culture war. And also the Council for National Policy, which is a similar think tank, all came from this same group, basically.
Absolutely. And the Koch brothers, their father was a founding member of the John Birch Society.
Absolutely. This is a sketchy one. Whether he was a financier or whether he was certainly a friend of Robert Welch, Fred Trump, Donald Trump's father as well, was, it's very much debated as to whether he was in the John Birch Society. Roger Stone says that he financed them and he was a good friend of members, essentially. He was also potentially a member of the Ku Klux Klan, was Fred Trump, although that's never been proven, but there's a lot of circumstantial evidence that might point towards that being potentially a fact. Alex Jones said on InfoWars that Trump is a John Birch Society president, and he once said that Donald Trump is more John Birch than the John Birch Society. So, who knows? But yeah, Charles and David Koch both followed in the footsteps of their father, Fred Koch, and were John Birch Society members. They basically feel that American liberals are secret commie traitors, and that there's a plot to secretly install communism through things like homosexuality, promiscuity, mixing of races, and general sort of moral degradation. They also, and this is a familiar one, since they started, they've been furiously angry that every year there's an attack on Christmas, which is just there to fundamentally undermine the religious aspect of America, which they believe to be or want to be a republic, not a democracy, because, well, reasons, basically. They're like, it seems to be connected with the idea that republics tend to favour the very, very wealthy. I don't know whether that's got anything to do with these oil barons' ideas about how they should be sort of ruled, but you know, we'll see later.
When I started looking into the John Birch Society like a few years back, like that was the one thing that really jumped out at me. All of a sudden I heard Robert Welch Jr. say a phrase that I had heard Jordan Maxwell say 100 times. And he said that democracy means mob rule. Yeah. And I was like, oh, holy shit, that's a Jordan Maxwell thing. It turns out Jordan Maxwell was like pen pals with one of the chapters, but he never actually had joined.
But they have very, very similar sort of like...
Oh, yeah.
Certain... This is the thing when you start to scratch the surface. Like, I mean, Jim Tucker wasn't really involved with them, but again, there's certain things that basically... they're all racist. That's like a lot of them are white supremacists, and a lot of them aren't very sort of like subtle about it. Even, like, to be quite honest, I mean, as I say, they actively oppose the civil rights movement, basically.
What I think is really fascinating. Firstly, I just think it's fascinating whenever I listen to you guys kind of unpack conspiracies, because you like reveal the real conspiracies behind conspiracies, which is really fascinating. But just as you were kind of saying that, Neil, and about obviously, you know, the racism, white supremacy, what is absolutely fascinating about this film is uses race, and it uses immigration, and it uses ethnicity in a different way that you wouldn't expect. It doesn't ever really make an anti-immigration point, even though it uses people that would have those opinions. And even one of the opening shots is like, I don't know whether this is him. There's a lot of what I presume is like AI kind of generated stuff. It's like a white guy with a black woman with biracial kids.
No, that's him.
And then is that him? Yeah. Then throughout, like, there's been a really conscientious decision that all the faces are multi-ethnic. And they're also later on, which I'm sure we'll get onto this, the use of like the immigrants from China, from the Falun Gong, persecuted from that. Again, he actually uses the voices of immigrants to push a very pro-America, anti-communist. So it's really interesting how this film takes all of those politics we're talking about from like the John Birch Society, etc., but purposely kind of almost like it wants itself to appear more liberal. Ironically, since this film just attacks liberalism throughout.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, they're using these people, aren't they? Basically, I hate to say this, but like, they almost use it as like, oh, this is my token black friend, which proves that I can't be racist. And it's like, oh, for crying out loud. Like, and but yeah, it's like that is a very conscious decision, I think, because it's a crazy thing, though. If you unpick what it actually says in the film, everything's awful. So they've got to set it up as, yeah, we're not that bad. We're all right. We're kind of nice. Just before we go, just to wind up, the other things that the John Birch Society is famous for is they thought that President Dwight D. Eisenhower, the president, right, they thought he was a secret communist agent. I don't know why. I've been spending all afternoon trying to find out. And basically, I think it's because he did this thing called the New Deal, and they opposed that. I think that's it. I really think it's that, basically.
I mean, I should say, like, from the outset, the fact Mikki Willis, the filmmaker, says even when it worked on Bernie Sanders' campaign, he didn't know what socialism or democratic socialism, like the level of understanding of political ideologies in this film is almost below GCSE level. Like it literally, liberalism, consumerism, socialism, communism, it puts it all in as this massive just red scare. And it's just so, there's no real depth to it.
Yeah, totally.
I think that's why I asked, like, earlier, do you think it's stupidity or naivete? Because that, for me, is how I fell for this whole, the left and the right is the two wings of the same bird, that sort of messaging in conspiracism. Like, because I was very politically naive about any of these terms or even the spectrum. I didn't really understand it at all, you know, so I think that it's going to appeal to people who don't understand the spectrum, and it just like it did for me.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? It doesn't. What's ironic about it is they basically kind of tell you that, like, you don't really even need to know about the spectrum because it's all fake, it's all bollocks, like it's all fixed and stuff like that. Yeah. However, if you are interested in it, there's this sort of one quite far to the right, and we think that you might enjoy that one. It's got God and it's got guns. It's not so keen on certain people, but, you know, if you're going to pick one, pick that. That's what they sort of say, basically. Right, so obviously the book None Dare Call It Conspiracy by Gary Allen, which is where we get our name, that also came from the John Birch Society, which tells the plot of the coming world communist takeover, and that is the book that started Alex Jones's career. Also, they opposed the fluoridation of water and sex education. They go so far as to say that basically the fluoridation of water is a communist plot. And you know, in Dr. Strangelove, General Ripper, the bit where he talks about our precious fluids, apparently that was Stanley Kubrick taking the piss out of the John Birch Society. The John Birch Society was so mental that even William Buckley, the person who threatened to knock out Gore Vidal live on television, thought that they were a little bit much, like, which is quite telling, basically. And also, this is a hark back to classic conspiracy time. The two organisations that they fear the most are the Council for Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission, which is massively ironic once you understand that essentially the Heritage Foundation that came from the John Birch Society does all the things that they accuse the CFR and Trilateral Commission of doing. Now, the CFR and the Trilateral Commission, they're powerful lobbying organisations that help wealthy people. Like, they're not there to create a communist takeover of the world. But hey-ho. But so Edward G. Griffin, he's had an interesting sort of life, basically. Born in 1931. Apparently, he became a child voice actor and later a voice announcer on certain radios and stuff like that. So he was a little bit like our Graham from there was the Cilla Black show, A Blind Date.
Yeah.
So you can imagine Cilla asking Graham, how did the date go? Well, it was good, Cilla, but we've all got to be fearful of communists.
Is that what the G stands for? Is Graham?
Yeah, I love it. It stands for George, sadly, not gangster. Although who knows?
He's always going to be Gangster Griffin to us now.
Yeah, he's always going to be that. Like, absolutely. He was in the army from 1954 to 1956. In 1968, he became a writer for. Now, this is starting to give you a hint of Edward Griffin's character. He became a writer for Curtis LeMay. Now, again, a Dr. Strangelove connection. General Ripper, the insane warmongering lunatic that decides to set about a mutual assured destruction and is concerned about the fluoridation of the water, is based on Curtis LeMay. Curtis LeMay was a very controversial figure in the US military. Some think he's great, some think he's a lunatic. It doesn't matter. He was basically being the vice presidential candidate for George Wallace. George Wallace was a racist, segregationist, populist, and massively opposed mixing of races in any form. And that's who Edward G. Griffin was working with.
G. Edward.
Yeah, G. Edward Griffin. Why does he say G. Edward? I don't. That's annoying, isn't it? Like,
to throw people off.
Yeah, basically. So he became an editor of the John Birch Society magazine called The New American. And in 1969, he did the presentation, which is littered throughout this film, which is called The More Deadly Than War, The Communist Revolution in Russia. In 1973, and this is, again, to show the connections that he's got, these are all going to be things that people who are familiar with conspiracies recognise. In 1973, he published a book called A World Without Cancer, which talks about using latriol taken from apricot kernels in order to naturally cause cancer. Like, people have tried this. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It's nonsense. In fact, you can actually give yourself poisoning by taking too much of this stuff because it's got, is it anthrax? No, it's
Cyanide.
Cyanide, thank you. Right, okay, so this is the point. You can actually kill yourself by doing this stupid quack medicine. In 1992, he went looking for Noah's Ark.
Okay, cool.
And he claims to have found it, but he couldn't get to it, or some shit or
Or is
other.
that in Turkey, Mount Ararat?
Yeah, it was around there. And trust me, bro, apparently, like, he definitely exists and is a real thing. In 1994, he did his most famous book, which is called The Creature from Jekyll Island, which talks about the meeting where all these conspiring bankers, some of whom happen to be of a certain specific faith, got together in order to basically make the Federal Reserve. And the point of the Federal Reserve is that it cheats everybody out of money, and money isn't real. It's all a promissory note. And basically, it's some sort of system to keep us enslaved forever. And in that book, he came up with the Rothschild quote, "My amateur Rothschild, let me print the money and I care not who makes the rules." And this is apparently, according to Mike Rothschild, friend of the show and all-round great author, he says that this is the first time that this quote is attributed to the Rothschild. It's a completely made-up quote. It's absolute bullshit, but it is the backbone of David Icke's career. Like, it is also, like, I'm telling you, like, it underpins everything that he talks about the global cabal and Sabbatian Frankists. And if you take out, like, because in the Sabbatian Frankist thing, there's this evidence, which is, someone said that the Sabbatian Frankists met up with the Rothschilds, and it basically, that's how the cult got sort of global sort of domination. Now, none of this works if the canards about the Rothschilds aren't true. And they're not. They're not. They're just not true. They didn't finance both wars. Hitler actually stole all their money. They didn't make a killing off the Battle of Waterloo and short the pound. They don't own the Bank of England. They aren't the wealthiest family on the planet. They're not even in the top 10. Like, they're just not. They're just nowhere, basically. And most of the sort of stuff came from either sort of medieval anti-Jewish sentiment or Nazi, absolute Nazi propaganda, like the film Die Rothschild. And this is the foundation of much of the conspiracy world. Oh, we're not being anti-Semitic. We're just talking about this specific Jewish banking family. And it transpires that none of that's true, basically. But it looks like it was G. Edward Griffin that actually came up with that. Other things that basically, like, his influence in the early 2000s, he became very, very sort of big on the AIDS denialism movement, claiming that HIV doesn't exist. And in 2012, he appeared, and I think he financed as well.
Yes, he did.
Why Twats?
Yes, he did.
What in the world are they spraying? The seminal chemtrails documentary. Wasn't the first time that chemtrails was mentioned. That was by a bloke called William Wallace, who then gave it to some journalist who then appeared on Art Bell. But this was the first major film that talked about chemtrails, and it is the one that most people reference because they say it's aluminium and strontium and barium, and we know this because we got it from the soil samples. Well, if you go and listen to our chemtrails deep dive, you'll find out exactly why that was false information and where they went wrong with that. And since then, basically, he's been sort of like a major figure in sort of all your sort of every documentary. They'll have him sort of show up. Or the sort of when it was the DVD era of conspiracies, he was on that. He's always on InfoWars, and in fact, even recently, I think Alex Jones referenced him as one of his heroes. So Brent's right. Like, G. Edward Griffin is he's the conduit between all these wacky, stupid ideas of the John Birch Society and modern day conspiracism. And like in so many directions, either directly through people like Alex Jones, people that have come out of that sort of stable, or through the ideas of Rothschild banking and stuff like that. He's influenced David Icke because of that. And again, that is the sort of underpinning of the New World Order conspiracy theory.
Totally. He's been on Coast to Coast AM 7 times.
Wow.
As well, talking about obviously the Federal Reserve and all of that.
Yeah.
But his most recent one was in May 2020.
Oh, yeah.
Talking about the coronavirus was a hoax.
Ah, for Christ's sake.
He was on it that early.
Saying it was a hoax that early.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's ridiculous as well. Yeah. Right. Well, so that gives you an idea of what the film is going to be like, basically. So G. Edward Griffin turns up and basically tells us that there's a world communist plot. And this is, again, like, it's just silliness and it's just absolute nonsense. But he's going to try and explain what it is. And he tells us in a really sort of like shocked and sort of, that history has been rewritten. He doesn't massively elaborate on this, but basically, the next sort of thing that he says, he goes on to say that socialism is a transitional stage to communism. And so what he's saying is that basically we can't trust, and this sort of explains what they're talking about with the welfare and stuff like that. Can't trust socialism. Why socialism? Right? Capitalism is, unfettered capitalism is basically like people own capitalists, and they basically get workers to work for them, and they're the tops at the top, there's the plebs at the bottom, and that's it. That's unfettered capitalism. In socialism, it is within the system of capitalism, but it has a safety net, sort of, say, things like free healthcare, free schooling, fire brigade, free police force. Things like that, systems that are there to protect the people. And so basically what it says is that basically it doesn't stop you from becoming incredibly wealthy, but it hopes to stop people from falling into extreme poverty. And that's all that socialism wants to do. Communism has private property and capital taken from capitalists and redistributed through the mechanism of the state to the general people. And Marx thought that socialism was wimpy. Marx thought that basically socialism wouldn't really cut it because there's no incentive for capitalists to give up their capital. They just don't have to. Like we see this. This is why people like Elon Musk exist. And so Marx felt that the only way to sort of solve this was not to hope for sort of charitable sort of outlay, was to have a violent revolution where we killed all those people, took their money and redistributed it to normal people. Now, communism as a system never seems to really work because basically there's a stage before the utopia stage where someone has to be a dictator in order to sort of transition this mechanism, this revolution into being. And often is the case is that when people are a dictator, they discover that it's quite fun to be the dictator. And they don't necessarily want to give everything up, and so they'll do all sorts of justifications to not do that. Basically, so
to quote Mel Brooks, "It's good to be the king."
Exactly, this is it. But what Edward Griffin is saying, and this is that basically all of these things, these giving people a chance and helping people out, is a slippery slope towards communism. And I'll reiterate at the point that they actually hate communism because of these systems, but it's not really that. It's because communism had strong workers' rights, trade unions. And so what they did was they tried to demonize trade unions. And there will be anybody that grew up in the era of Thatcher will be very, very sort of reminiscent of this. Demonizing trade unions as corrupt organizations, which sometimes they became. Any organization has that ability. but in order to take away the rights from the workers. And this is what capitalism sort of yearns for, the exploitation of the masses. In fact, I don't want to come across as all far left, but capitalism depends on exploitation. You need to get somebody to work and to create more than you pay them in order for you to be profitable as an organization. And so essentially exploitation underpins capitalism.
It should just kind of add, like, I think some excellent kind of summaries there, Neil. And just, you know, with like Thatcherism and Reagan during that period of like the late 70s into the 80s, was a new period of capitalism, which is neoliberalism, yes. And where things kind of changed from this old model. And a lot of Marx's analysis was based on the industrial capitalism, whereas now we've shifted into neoliberalism. And I think what this film really fails to kind of understand is the differences between things like neoliberalism and communism, and literally equates the two things together in a very simple way.
Well, the other thing that we've got, which is also sort of gives you an idea of sort of the exploitative nature of capitalism, is that we've got privatisation now, which what happened was basically, again, with the Reagan-Thatcher era, they said, look, we've got the public, when we run this, we bugger up all these things. What we do, we get these experts in these companies that come in, and that basically, because their profitability is dependent on them delivering goods and services in a good way, they're bound to be better than if the government is responsible for this. And that is balls. Because it just doesn't. Because what happens is that basically the corporations become so powerful and such sort of lobbying interests and so wealthy that they basically go, we're in a monopoly now. And the best example of this is the train service in the UK, which is shit and massively expensive. Because a private company has been put in charge, they can get away with it because they realise that basically, like, what are you going to do? This is our infrastructure, essentially. You can't have this. And we're going to continue. We've got you by the balls, essentially. And so, and people knew this when this sort of privatisation and Thatcher Reaganite sort of era of capitalism was going on. But the reason that basically they got away with it was because it was going to make them and all their mates really, really rich. And that's exactly what happened. And that's why it continues. And we now live in a hellscape.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to add on to the idea of like the privatization of industries is, again, later on, this film doesn't understand the concept of disaster capitalism, which was really well kind of described by Naomi Klein in her book. And if anyone's read Doppelganger as well, which is about conspiracism, which is, again, really brilliant. These guys in this film, it makes this argument that, like, when crises happen, so like COVID, for example, that this is a secret ploy for the people, you know, for this conspiracy to bring in communism. But it just doesn't understand that this is disaster capitalism. When there's a problem, people would jump in to make profit to fix it. Like, that's how capitalism works.
Well, it seems strange, doesn't it? Because it very early takes sort of like aim at Pfizer, and it's like, sorry, they're one of the largest companies on the planet, right? Okay, I'm pretty sure they're not interested in communism in any way.
Absolutely.
Nor the World Economic Forum, nor is Bill Gates, nor any of these people, basically. But it's ridiculous.
What I found about this statement that he makes of socialism is a step towards communism or whatever. It's basically the slippery slope fallacy. And I thought to myself, well, you could actually flip that around the other way, mate. Like, if you want to use a slippery slope fallacy, you could say, well, conservatism is a slippery slope to fascism.
Yeah.
You know, but it's just not necessarily.
And there's a lot more evidence to support that argument than there is communism. I'll tell you that for nothing, right? So then they go on about how Canada is terrible, and they show some right-wing twats being beaten up for cops for stupid COVID protests. And then they whinge for a long time about the trucker protests, which, by the way, were arranged by non-truckers. And here's the thing that people don't realise. It wasn't an anti-COVID thing. It was a political thing. They wanted to dissolve the federal government because they think that that Justin Trudeau is a communist. Some of them even think that Castro is his secret father because they're idiots. But yeah, and he also and the film goes ahead to say that Trudeau is a literal dictator of Canada. And the reason that they know this is because he says that he likes China. And he's like, what? I don't, where even with that? So again, they've already started lying about people's political movements and the intent of the trucker protest and the people who were behind it and stuff like that. And yeah, ridiculous.
I found this whole Canada thing like absolutely surreal. It was like it comes from a moment of Jim Carrey like talking about his Nike shoes and about Canada having free healthcare. And then it cuts to like, again, a pure manipulation. It cuts to footage of the police beating up demonstrators as if it's a dictatorship. And all I did was like, when watching it, is like, you could literally do that about any state. You could find footage of any country. That's what the police do. And I think this is, again, where it misunderstands nuance of political ideology. It literally compares Trudeau's Canada with communist China. And it's like, yes, both can be authoritarian. Police can like, beat people at times, but they actually are vastly kind of different politically as well.
Hugely different. Completely different, some might say.
I mean, there was footage of BLM protesters getting beat up.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they could have cut that into it.
It's very selective.
Yeah.
But they won't because they don't support that movement.
Well, this is it. And that does come up later on, basically. So, then he started. The other thing is like Canada. Right, what's ironic about this is a lot of the sort of people that say Canada is a literal commie/Nazi dictatorship. And it's like your Trump supporters, Trump has actively promoted fascist policies and spoken fascist rhetoric, not hyperbolically, because he knows it appeals to this audience who for some reason think they're fighting Nazis, except for the ones that know they're Nazis, that proudly wave the Nazi flags and stuff like that. It's such a bizarre sort of setup, and I don't get it. And it's like, you know, they do say that like Canada is this just absolute authoritarian hellhole. It's like, you know, Blade Runner or God knows also what, some sort of 1984 or something like that. And I've been to Canada and I know people that live in Canada and they all say it's really nice. And I found it really nice. So I don't know who to believe. I'm torn. But then, just to prove that they're not being hysterical, they start talking about how the World Economic Forum, so not communism then, because it's the World Economic Forum, but it's a lobbying organisation of some of the largest fucking businesses on the planet that promotes stakeholder capitalism. It's as far from like communism as you can. But they're concerned that not only is it going to introduce a world communist state, but also that Klaus Schwab is a Nazi.
This was like one of the weirdest moments, right? When it brought up the fear of the reset, and then it has like this cut, and the music is bonkers, and it's this footage of Klaus Schwab wearing that like weird costume, and literally it then has images of Nazis, and it's like just setting this up. It's bonkers.
It took me a while. I was sat there and I was like, the fuck is this? And I can't remember whether somebody mentioned something or they showed something. I think they showed something that said NSDAP or something like that. And I went, oh, I get it. This is because they're appealing to a certain thing. It's Nazis were National Socialists. And so it's all the same thing. And it's like, it couldn't be more different. Yes, they were originally called the National Socialist Workers' Party of Germany because they wanted to appeal to workers and essentially, the working man, because that's where you got the votes. But they couldn't be more anti-socialist if they tried. They killed socialists. They shut down trade unions, and they got massive organisations like IB, Farben and TS and Steel. They're essentially like a corporatist society where corporations had a huge say in the running of or a huge influence on the country. So they were capitalist far right. They couldn't be further removed from socialism. They used the name to appeal to people initially, and that was it. So again, but that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to basically say, it's that stupid fucking internet argument of Nazis were communists and communists are bad. but Nazis aren't bad because Nazis oppose communists. But I thought they were like, it's nonsense, right? It's nonsense.
And as you've just brought up the interesting costume that he is wearing, someone asked me before, like, oh, can you guys like clarify certain things as we go along? You know, because we don't really know everything you're talking about. Like, there's often this pictures of Klaus Schwab in this weird, allegedly weird outfit. In reality, was it a Lithuanian?
Yeah, it's the university robes of a university somewhere in Eastern Europe.
I think it's Lithuania.
And he's receiving it. I think it might be, and he's receiving an honorary doctorate, and that's why they're all dressed. And let's be honest, he does look rather strange and stuff like that. But you know what? A mortarboard
There you go.
cloak looks bizarre.
Exactly.
I would just also, as a fan of your show, I would recommend your deep dive on the World Economic Forum and about stakeholder capitalism and shareholder capitalism, and loved the euphemism of, I think it was The Sopranos versus The Wire. Yeah, like I really do, because at the moment, like, you know, in the world of conspiracism, the World Economic Forum has been this huge thing that people have spoken about. But I would just say to other listeners, I loved your show on that. It gave me so much information, because, you know, I've been in situations where I stayed at an Airbnb once, and the guy that ran it started talking to me about the World Economic Forum, and I was like, oh no, here we go. So, like, it really, when that came up in this film and it was going there, I actually thought, wicked, thank you for arming me with, like, actual information and facts. So, yeah, highly recommend your deep dive on that, guys.
Thank you.
Great stuff.
But basically what they start to say is that they show the sort of the Klaus Schwab, we penetrate the cabinets, and saying that everyone should be vaccinated. Now, just to make it absolutely clear, right, the World Economic Forum is a lobbying organisation. It is not without its problems. Essentially, that basically lobbying allows large corporations to get in the ear of politicians, and basically it benefits the super wealthy. But it's not communist, and they're not looking to create a world government, and they aren't really penetrating the governments like Klaus Schwab boasted. He was basically bragging at this meeting. And they're also not actually interested in doing any of the things that they say they're interested in. Like they sort of make sort of very sort of like basic sort of leanings towards, we should probably do something about the environment. We should probably do something about workers' conditions and workers' rights. We should probably do something about the third world. They're not going to do anything about it. In fact, the corporations that lobby the World Economic Forum are the ones that are causing these problems. What the World Economic Forum is there to do is to present a positive image for a load of nefarious capitalist bastards. And in that sense, it's a bad thing. But it certainly isn't the Illuminati, and it isn't looking to change society in any way other than to make themselves increasingly richer as time goes on. But they start talking about the Great Reset, and the Great Reset has been pinned as this thing that was connected to COVID. It was an opportunity to reset the world into a quasi-socialist state. It's not. It's capitalism. You get everything for free. You get all your products for free. And because basically everything is so plentiful. In fact, that's not even the Great Reset. I'm getting ahead of myself, right? Okay. The Great Reset was a fucking Duller's Dishwater book by Klaus Schwab that essentially says, in the future, this might happen. If this happens, this is a way to make money out of it. In the future, this might happen. If that happens, it might be a way to make money out of it. What has been done is mashed together with this essay by this Dutch teacher called Ida Auken that was asked to write a thought experiment about a potential future where everything was free, goods and services were free because the planet is so profitable. And she did. She didn't have, it wasn't a policy idea. She's a teacher in a school in Holland. She's got no power. She didn't even say that she liked it. She just came up with an idea. This is one possible future. Here's the good things. Here's the bad things. it's not real in the sense that everybody's concerned about it. But according to Plandemic 3, it's this Nazi commie takeover of the world that will ultimately be a one world government, according to someone called David E. Martin, that is quasi-socialist. Also, it pointed out that basically the Great Reset, like that concept, because they always call their yearly conferences something that sounds like they're going to do some good that never comes about, right? Okay. The Great Reset was in 2014. The Ida Alkin article came out in 2016. When the fuck are these things going to happen? Like, they had the perfect opportunity, apparently. That's what the conspiracy says, with COVID, which was all fake to make this happen. And then they dropped the fucking ball with it, apparently. Like, what?
And isn't it fascinating that these are like almost marketing buzzwords?
Of course they are.
Like, that have been used to probably like brand themselves. And yet people have actually swallowed that and actually not actually critiqued that it's actually bullshit. And actually have swallowed that and amplified it or magnified it as being a much bigger, scary thing.
It's interesting you say that, because that's exactly what they go on to do. They misrepresent the Chinese social credit system, which, by the way, when it says social credit, there's this myth in conspiracy circles and right-wing circles that what this Chinese thing is through facial technology. If you pet a cat, you get points. If you kick a cat, you get points taken off. And it's stuff like, if you say something dissenting of the government, you get points taken off. If you help an old lady across the road, you get points taken off. If that old lady, so it begs the question, if that old lady was saying dissenting things about the government and you didn't help her across the road, would you get points? Who can say? There's even bullshit like, basically, your social credit is connected to your phone, and if you stand next to somebody who's got low social credit, you'll get an alarm, and if you don't move out of the area, your credit rating will go down. Now, none of this is true. None of it is true at all. What the Chinese social credit system is it's very akin to our credit system. You know, your credit, like, which basically means how much loans you can take out and whether you're eligible for a mortgage, and certain products, whether you can get, like, pay monthly and that type of thing, direct debits, things like this. Okay. In China, there is a cultural problem with people not paying debts. I don't understand it. I don't know enough about it to say any more than that. But this was felt sufficient that basically if people are highly in debt, the social credit system stops them doing things that would get them more in debt, and also stops them paying for certain what would be considered luxury items like high-end plane tickets and stuff like that. So, personally, I don't agree with it. I don't agree with that. I wouldn't want that system in this country. But it has been massively, massively misrepresented by the conspiracy crowd as to be almost like, you ever seen the Scanner Darkly, where basically they're following him through the CCTV and basically they're listening to his phone call and they figure out like that he's buying drugs, and they're like, she's hovering over the shall I go arrest him or not button. And it's not like that at all. It just isn't. They do also have a facial recognition technology thing, which has picked people out of stadiums and stuff like that for like traffic fines and whatnot. And they do also shame people publicly with like, this person has done this and done jaywalking and things like that in the thing, in the like public. But again, the culture is different. And so those things are more effective. If you try to like, can you imagine if you put kids with Asbos on fucking like, like, you know, in Piccadilly Circus or whatever, they'd fucking love it.
Yeah.
People would take that as a badge of honor in this country.
Hey, initiates, it's me, Brent Lee. Just a quick intermission here before we get back into the episode to tell you about our new and improved Patreon. We've added a brand new initiate tier for those of you who want to listen to Some Dare Call It Conspiracy without the ads. This entry-level tier is only £2 a month. Or join our second level tier and become a shill for just £4.50 a month. Not only will you get ad-free episodes of the podcast, you'll also have early access to every new episode up to a week before they're released to the public. And a premium episode made only for Patreons every month. Also included, is a welcome pack of our previous content. Neil is giving you 4 of his books, including Now's the Only Thing That's Real, a re-examination of the Manson murders, motives, and mythos. I have got 8 albums to give you, from my time back as a producer and rapper. And the great Nicholas C. Gray is giving you a copy of Headache Comics 4. Plus, an invitation to join our private Discord where you can chat to the Some Dare Call It community. And finally, the Handler tier. For £9 a month, you'll get everything I've already mentioned, but you'll also get an invitation to join us live every time we record an episode. You can hop in the chat and ask us or our guests anything during the session, and you'll get to see everything that goes on behind the scenes, including all of Neil's hot takes that I have to cut out of the final mix. So, please, if you can, do consider joining us on patreon.com/somedarecallitconspiracy. Now, let's get back to the show.
And who else doesn't like it?
Oh, yes, sorry, absolutely. The World Economic Forum and George Soros on multiple occasions have come out saying that the Chinese credit system is bad and they don't like it.
Yep.
Now, you could make the argument that this is a double bluff, but it totally goes against the idea that they are advocating for this, which Alex Jones, David Icke, and all of these people will tell you that the World Economic Forum is pushing to have these types of systems. It isn't. Who knows if in private, when the demons speak to them, that's what they want. But their public position is that all of those things, they are absolutely opposed to them.
I mean, it's fascinating hearing about that. Just to kind of like add on to, I think what's interesting with this film, there are moments where, like with all conspiracy theories, there is valid criticism. Like off the back of the Chinese credit system, it then shows like some of the totalitarian examples of how China responded to COVID. And I think and even earlier on, like even the freezing of bank accounts of protesters is a dangerous civil rights issue, whether you agree with those protesters or not. To me, it's a dangerous place in terms of civil rights. So there are elements of truth, or that this, and even later on when it gets onto I think the Falun Gong, some of that stuff is heartbreaking. Some of the persecutions people have experienced. So it's interesting that there's a thread of stuff in there, based absolutely all then based around fabrication. And before the Chinese credit system, it kind of linked the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab, China being his model. But it also then threw in, there was kind of a link just before it got to the Chinese credit system of AI and technology. The guy from the Sapiens book, who all these conspiracy theories hate. Yeah, talking about science and evolution. And then it claimed that China is gathering our DNA via COVID tests. And then that all linked kind of to the Chinese credit system. Like all of this was just mashed in together as one thing.
Well, it's just a big sci-fi gish gallop, isn't it, basically?
Yeah.
Like they're throwing shit at the wall and hoping that something scares you or overwhelms you, basically. But at this point, this is when they call themselves and the entire audience stupid, because they have somebody on who basically says that, strangely, it's intelligent people that seem to fall for this authoritarian system, that they just can't see through it, because they go on to say that basically it's this blind belief of institutions, and it ties in with the idea that education is indoctrinating. And so what they're saying is all this book learning, all this so-called intelligence, institutionalized people, and that education is a government program that teaches you to believe the official story.
It was frightening, to be honest, the intellectualism that started coming out of the film. I was shocked when it actually said about, it's the intelligent people that they're the most tricked. I work in universities. I teach as an associate lecturer. It has no understanding of people that do degrees or MAs. There is lots of critical thinking. They don't oof.
And arguing.
Yes, and debating, like healthy debating. And I have to say, at this point in the film, I don't think it was this guy that said this stuff about intelligent people. There was another guy before him as well. I think Professor Matthias Desmet. And in his opening line was he told you his qualifications, like how he was trained. Have you seen like Brass Eye or The Day Today?
Oh, yes.
I thought this, and as it went into like, yes, intelligent people, they're the most like ignorant. I actually thought, I questioned, is this a joke? Like, is this actually serious? Because it seemed like farcical.
Well, they're also calling themselves stupid because they can see through it, so they're not intelligent. There's several points. One, they're calling themselves stupid. Two, it shows that they have no understanding of what happens once you get past secondary level education, and they're just demonizing it in a way that absolutely doesn't work. And then basically they started to fetishize the working man. And that blew my fucking mind, because this is an anti-communist film. And the fetishization of the working man and the persecution of the intellectual crowd perfectly mirrors certain things that Stalin did and the Khmer Rouge did and various other communist regimes did. And it's like, they don't realize this. They just didn't realize what they were fucking doing there. Like, and yeah, it was ridiculous. It was very akin to communist anti-academic fetishization of the workers. Like, it was bizarre.
But again, this whole film is contradictory. Like, just to go back to that first point of like how it used that quote about history is a lie. Yeah, it then goes on to kind of completely fabricate history. Like, this film like scares you about totalitarianism and all that, but actually itself like paves the way potentially by some of the ideas it's putting out there for totalitarianism.
Well, it's interesting you say, because then that sort of poison dwarf Zelenko comes on and starts talking about how fear is psychological warfare, and he's implying that COVID is the mechanism for this. And he says that fear stops you thinking. And it was at this point that I thought, this is the third film in a series telling people about, it's like a fake pandemic that has been designed to slave them into a communist system where they have to eat bugs and might die from taking vaccinations. And they're lecturing us about how basically fear stops you from thinking. That's some balls there.
Yeah, they're giving the game away, aren't they?
Isn't it? Like, very much so. Like, yeah, I mean, what is more fearful than, like, they're trying to enslave humanity, and if you take the medicine, you'll die. Like, this, it's a fairly high-tension situation that they're promoting.
And again, it was just strange how, like, they kind of project this view that everyone is so stupid that followed the rules of, like, whether lockdown or vaccinations. Yeah. But again, as I'm watching this, I'm like, there's no real understanding of reality, because I don't, I have criticisms of the pharmaceutical industry, of the state, of the government, of authority. But you know what? I can also make a judgment during a public health crisis that actually to stay inside, to look out for each other and to get vaccinated is actually a clever thing to do. So people did think for themselves, but they just didn't happen to follow what Mikki Willis and all these other people ironically want them all to follow.
Well, ironically, the film basically says that people got connected through the COVID experience, missing the idea that basically this is exactly what radicalized all these twats online, that basically like they found a like-minded community that created this incredible LARP where they're the hero, as opposed to some nincompoop that just got a bit of a fanny about a medicine that they didn't want to take. Like that. And again, the lack of self-awareness in this documentary was astonishing. You had twats coming on like JP Sears saying basically, there's all these people that think they're doing the right thing, but they're actually doing the wrong thing. And it's like, you don't say. Like, the irony train just does not stop at this film station at all. It was ridiculous. But what they're doing in this bit is they're framing COVID denialists as rebels against the system. Like, which is again ironic because Like, because again, if you want to go back to the Joseph Campbell idea, the rebels are the rebels in Luke Skywalker and stuff like that. Famously, George Lucas based them on the Viet Cong.
Yep.
So this guy's got all these metaphors and all these ideas mixed up and so matched together that it's just ridiculous.
Mentioning that JP Sears, this is something that actually was one of the things that was really annoying me about this documentary. And it was when they put his name up, and they did this with all the men. All right, they didn't actually do this with any of the women. But every single man that came up, when it had like their occupation, at their name and occupation, it always listed father first.
I didn't spot that.
So it was father comedian.
Bizarre.
So, same with Mikki Willis. It was like when he introduced himself, he said, "I'm a father, a husband, and a filmmaker." Every single time. And I just kept thinking, like, so what? Because I'm not a father, my voice isn't valid? Is that what you're trying to say? You know, but obviously we know what it ties in with the tradcon kind of mythology. But still, like, every time one of those names popped up, I was pissed. I was like, what you assholes? Like, seriously.
That's fair. I hadn't spotted that, to be quite honest. But yeah. Then some woman pops up. It tells us that living in Maoist China was horrible. And it lists a whole series of things about how China was terrible, because apparently they all look a bit asexual, which was a less than subtle dig at trans people. And China's atheist. Oh my God! Like, and so that was a big thing. And they basically say that it got the youngster to believe the state over their parents, which is very, very clearly a sort of reference to sort of Greta Thunberg and that type of sort of environmental thing.
And the trans stuff, because the teachers don't tell the parents, that's what they'll bring into as well. So it's kind of a reference to the trans kids as well.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And was this one of the ladies from the Falun Gong?
No, it was the lady that was not. She's not political.
Okay, we'll get to her later.
Are you? Well, yeah, fair enough.
Because she closes out, so we'll get to her later.
Oh, does she? Right. Okay, cool.
But what was interesting, just going into this point, was they kind of set themselves up as victims. They did go.
Oh Christ!
The film went through a whole beat of, because they didn't get vaccinated, they got bullied,
persecuted.
Persecuted. They very much set themselves up. But it was the woman was Lily Tang Williams, who was the speaker here, who isn't, I don't believe she's part of the Falun Gong, but she was, like I said earlier, she was this real device here to use this kind of immigrant voice. And again, you know, probably some valid criticisms of what she's experienced in China. But it just made this leap of suddenly it was like, and they want everything to be no gender, asexual. And it's like, oh my God, is it really going there? It just really wanted to link with all the anti-transphobic stuff. It was so obvious.
In her defense, she did make it completely clear that she is in no way political.
Yeah.
It's like, she then went on to say that woke is communism, which is an obvious dog whistle to cultural Marxism. And is also completely not true. I mean, she literally just talks about how oppressive the communist state was that she escaped from. And it's like, how do you think like a Sam Smith would go across in that regime that she's talking about? Do you think, zhuzhing up your asexual atheist workers uniform would really go across well? It's just absolute nonsense, basically.
And it wasn't just her that actually said that. Bill Mayer, who years ago, actually, he made a really interesting documentary about religion. I thought he was quite an interesting guy. About
religious.
Yeah. But he actually said woke revolution and Chairman Mao's revolution are like the same thing. And that is just the most, he knows what he's doing there. There's such a crazy comparison.
Yeah,
to do that.
The joke was I put what's the difference between those two things into ChatGPT and it said, how long have you got?
Yeah.
Oh dear. But anyway, so then Edward. Now this is where the documentary started getting a little bit sinister. Even it's sinister anyway. But like, Edward Griffin comes back on and starts telling us all about how democracy is deadly, and that we shouldn't have democracy because Aristotle disliked democracy. It seems a bit selective there about, because knowing what I know about ancient Greeks and such like that, there's probably certain aspects of Aristotle's personality and ideology that he doesn't agree with. But he's decided to pick this idea about basically how he disliked democracy, and he's not quite sort of represented it accurately, because essentially, it's a very, very different time, right? Okay, I don't think we need to like express that. Like, I mean, it's party time, all wearing togas. Like, Aristotle essentially wanted oligarchs to rule, but he wanted them to rule democratically and fairly, but he thought that the current system of democracy, as it was in those times, could be manipulated because basically people were, and here's the ironic thing, easily tricked by populists. So it's the stuff that actually G. Edward Griffin would be promoting that is the stuff that Aristotle felt that was bad, was the bad aspect of democracy. So again, like the metaphors and ideas are all over the place in this thing. He then says that basically what he wants is a constitutional republic. Now, a constitutional republic is very, very small government, but here's the problem. It's run by, what he says is like, we get a set of rules that we all agree on, and that's it, and we just get on with it. And the problem with the constitutional republic is that it's run by oligarchs by definition. And obviously, once you're in power, that tends to become a dictatorship. So who sets the rules? And are the rules like beneficial for everyone in society, or just for the people that set the rules, who we must remember in this system have all the power and all the money? It favours the wealthy. It's very bad for the common man. It tends to fall into plutocracies and cronyism, because essentially once you've got that sort of money, it's very much like modern day Russia, essentially. It favours the unscrupulous because there's a lack of government oversight and regulation. It doesn't have social safety nets at all, and it tends to have sort of less... it would favour things like insurance-based healthcare and no welfare and stuff like that. And so actually, it's really not actually a good system. And it's ironic that just like 10 minutes ago, they were pandering to this fetishization of the working man, who would be served appallingly by such a system. Like, this system only serves rich white men, essentially. Then what he does is he misrepresents socialism as wanting total government involvement, and it doesn't. Communism wants total government involvement or total government oversight and control. Socialism doesn't. Socialism wants systems that prevent people from slipping into poverty. And he starts to go on about how individualism is the best thing for society versus collectivism, or as I put it, selfishness versus community.
But he says it's not selfish to be an individualist.
But it is by very definition. I mean, that's that.
By not caring about anyone else.
It's not selfish. Like, that's how we all strive, because it forces you to, like, it forces you to get on in the world. It totally misses the concept of luck and social status and hierarchy, and the fact that if we were in a system, all of those things would be greatly exacerbated, making the ladder even further staggered. Like, so again.
But they don't like the term selfish. They prefer to describe themselves as enlightened self-interest.
Yeah, but again,
selfish.
But what they're doing as well, again, this is a subtle nod to like COVID deniers and people that made everything a whole lot worse. You're not selfish pricks. You're individuals, and it should be all about individualism. And this is the problem. That's sort of almost like the perfect example of why, you know what? No, individualism fucks stuff up when there's a crisis that affects more than just you, right? And you're being mildly inconvenienced or put out doesn't supersede the health of everybody else. And what's embarrassing about this is that children understand this. Children inherently understand these types of things. But what they've done is they've basically gone, yeah, fuck everybody else, because they're terrified of having stuff taken away from them. It's terrible.
And again, it's like when they talk about the individual versus collectivism, it kind of made this distinction where it says the individual, first they look after themselves, then they look after their family, and then anyone outside that may be in need. Did I get that right, Brent?
Well, let me jump in again, because this is the thing that was pissing me off when he was talking as well, because what he actually said was, first, he looks after himself. Then he looks after his family.
And again, what this film doesn't understand, like on a political level, like is criticism. It is criticised liberalism and democracy and capitalism, consumerism. But the irony here is there's absolutely swallowed everything about neoliberal capitalism, which is all about the individual. It's what Thatcher and Reagan wanted to do. They wanted to get rid of the idea of class solidarity, whether that was smashing, like in Britain, smashing the miners, whether it was like getting rid of like standing at like football stadiums, every element of like class solidarity and life, council houses and stuff like that. It wanted to destroy any sense of like a body of people, a collective. And we are like, you know, if you read anything about kind of evolution or evolutionary psychology, we kind of, again, we are actually caring people about each other. We aren't, like, it's quite a really cold outlook on life to think that actually we're all really selfish. Because I think ultimately human beings, we as a species, we develop together. Like the best example is like the lifeboat men. Is like they're people that do that for free, will go out and rescue people. And they always use that example of when did human civilization, the first example isn't the first city. The first example is a bone that was like fixed and mended, because it meant that people had to stay with that person and look after them from external dangers. So it's just really mad that it goes off on this whole individualism versus collectivism, yet earlier on it was kind of actually critiquing a philosophy based on individualism. And also, there's so many contradictions here.
I got a question for you then. Do you think this like kind of ties in with the bullshit alpha kind of talk?
Oh yeah, of course.
Like they think that they're all like lone wolves or something.
Yeah, they're all twats. They're all basically, they've got this hero fantasy in their own head, like, and basically like they see themselves as the main character and the superhero. They're all going through their own Joseph Campbell experience, basically. And in order to do that, you've got to have enemies and stuff. So this is why they're propping this stuff up. And the irony of this stupid individualism is that they don't believe in individualism. They believe in individualism for themselves. They want to impose rules on individuals that happen to be gay or black or foreign or trans or poor. They're very keen on the collectivization of white people. Like, they're not so keen on the individual rights of anybody that doesn't fall under their group. Like, which is, you know, again, it just shows that it doesn't. It's the veneer is paper thin. It's bullshit. It's just basically some justification to act like a dick, and that's really it. Like, I know that sounds glib, but that's what it is basically. Like, well, then they start shouting about globalism and how they're going to replace all states with a one world government, and the way that they're going to do this is through ESG scores. ESG scores are basically like how it's a score that says like how environmentally sound your company is, and we speak about this in WEF deep dive. They basically claim that Sri Lanka collapsed due to ESG scores, which just isn't true. Basically, they changed to an organic farming system far too quickly, and the country was massively in debt due to right-wing corruption, and they basically stopped buying pesticides because they wanted to save $400 million. It was nothing to do with ESG scores. And furthermore, no one gives a shit about ESG scores. Amazon and Tesla, and they've all got terrible ESG scores. No one gives a shit. Like, the only thing that ESG scores are there for, they're to impress other insurance firms, and nobody takes them seriously anyway. They're not there to impress the public or to be relevant to the public. They're there to, like, it's something completely different, and it's nonsense. They then completely misrepresent the Dutch farmer protests and farmer protests all over the world as being anti-World Economic Forum. It's nothing to do with that. It's to do with the Dutch government wanting to limit nitrogen release, and it's not even because of global warming. It's because it's poisoning wetlands and natural habitats for certain animals in Holland, to the degree where it's going to make it uninhabitable. It's really not a loony greeny thing at all. And the amount of people that are actually affected by it, to be fair, it was really badly communicated by the Dutch government and basically made it look like farmers were going to have to foot the bill. They've now said that no, that was never the intention, and blah, blah, blah. But these were all hijacked by right-wing groups who basically just saw it as like red meat for their sort of like followers. And then they start ranting on about land grabs because apparently Bill Gates owning farmland with which he's going to have farms is apparently something to do with starving us all to death. Like, what it's not. What it is basically like, it's a very profitable market and he's got loads of money. So he's bought a load of farms and he's going to continue to farm on them and make even more money. That's it. They're not buying up the farms so that basically, like, one day we wake up and it's like, there's nothing to eat. That bastard. Like, but,
and it made that weird link between, like, a billionaire such as Bill Gates buying up the land.
Yeah.
I think someone literally said is the same as Marxism, communism, because the state owns the land.
Yeah, and they made the same thing about house prices increasing. It's like, that's peak capitalism, and you're trying again to display that this is exactly what they do in communism. They put up the houses of the price of the houses. Now, in communism, they give you a house. Like, okay, again, I'm not advocating the system, but like, at least represent it accurately. Well, can you believe that they then misrepresent Marxism again? Because they say that basically Marxism is about, and this is a quote, this is a real quote, Marxism is the abolition of private property. And that they basically tie this in. So all the oligarchs are going to own it. And then, other than the fact that that's an oligarchy, not communism, again, let's not get bogged down in this stupid shit. Like, when they say Marxism is the abolition of private property, it doesn't mean the abolition of personal property. Like, you're still allowed to have your stuff. Private property in this regard means ownership of a business. You know, like we were saying earlier, privatization of healthcare and such like that. In Marx, there is no privatization. It's all run by the state, supposedly for the benefit of everybody in the country, because they all have a part of it and are working to make the system strive. So if you have to lie about your argument isn't very strong. And this is not the first time that they've lied.
Just want to say a couple of words. AI Karl Marx. I'm sure it's how he would have wanted to be remembered.
Absolutely. What's all that about? Crazy.
This film has, like, and this is one moment, I think some of the philosophers you were talking about earlier had, like, the Greek philosophers, this stuff looks terrible. Like,
it was
Karl
really
Marx.
bad, wasn't it? Like, it looked like
done as AI.
When they showed Stalin, he looked like a Street Fighter 2 character. Like, I was like, he's going to die in a minute. Like, but sadly that didn't happen. But they did then point out that Marx was an atheist and also a lazy freeloader, which may well be true. But what they're doing there is they're tying a theme. They're weaving the theme through of welfare, lazy, communist, godless. And that's the antithesis of apparently what they are, which is, again, not strictly true, but let's not get bogged down with that. So they then go on to say that Edward G. Griffin comes out with something astonishing. He says that labels such as fascist, Nazi, racist, extremist, and anti-Semite are just communist smears to halt dissent. And that's quite telling. Because I don't get called any of those things. Like,
No.
do you guys?
No.
On a regular basis?
I found it quite ironic that it made this statement, and then later on there is a speaker from the Nation of Islam who
Yes.
they've never had anything anti-Semitic associated with them before. So,
Yeah.
it's strange that people would say that about them. Yeah.
Then they go on to say that calling somebody a transphobe or calling somebody a racist is just bullying. And these are the tactics that communists use. And it's like, hang on, it's not bullying, is it? It's pointing out that you've probably been bullying a trans person, or at least oppressing them. Like, or, if someone's calling you racist, the idea, this is what's so strange about this culture war thing, is like, they can't just come out and say, some do, but they can't just come out and say, the majority say, yeah, I want to be racist. I am racist. They couch it with two ways. Stop labelling me and oppressing me. That's bullying. And stop stopping my free speech. What was it that you wanted to say that people were stopping you from saying? Was it about economics or something like that? No, it wasn't that, was it? It was something about race, was it? Oh, okay. Well, but you see, this is the problem, you see, because you want to say racist things, right? Okay, and be racist, which is an argument if you've got that free speech argument. But you then cannot complain when someone else using their free speech says, I think that thing that you just said is racist. And this is the bullshit that is the culture war. And this whole sort of, again, we're victims, we're being bullied, you're calling us racist. Now, what they're trying to express is that they're unjustifiably called racist or whatever, or unjustifiably called transphobes. But they're not. They're called racist or transphobes because they tend to spend things like the bell curve, or that black people are disproportionately inclined to be involved in crime, or that trans people or gay people are actually just trying to groom your children. So that's why we're calling you racist, or that's why we're calling you transphobic, because of your racist and transphobic views. And the fact that you've resorted to the childish tactic of going, well, you're bullying me and or stopping my free speech. Well, the latter is admitting that basically, you've just been called out, but you want to be able to do it. And the former is just juvenile to the point of it's embarrassing. And for fuck's sake, you're supposed to be the master race. Come on. Ridiculous. But anywho, so they then go on to say that Black Lives Matter is a communist plot to divide USA. And it's like, sorry, to divide the USA against who? Those commie bastards that don't want the police murdering black people with impunity, and those people that think that's all right. Is that what it's supposed to be? Is that the plot? Because that seems to be what they're saying, and that doesn't make sense.
At this point, when they brought up BLM and they brought up the founder or one of the founders of BLM,
Yeah.
I kind of thought to myself, hold on, I thought you guys, supported freedom. If someone wants to be communist, aren't they allowed to be communist?
No, they're not. Because collectivism is bad, and so we've got to protect the collective that is the United States by denying the individual. My brain's gone. Yeah, it's almost as if it's shit. It's almost as if it's just mental gymnastics that is there to legitimize people being wealthy, selfish, racist, bigot reactionaries that are terrified by anything in the world and want to make everyone else terrified by it by misrepresenting the facts.
Yeah.
But,
Trying to legitimize their hate and their fear, essentially.
Yeah. Well, again, and this is exactly what they do, because they go on to say basically that the race war, which isn't a thing, will become class war, which it won't. and again, it's just that's just nonsense. Again, all they're doing there is nobody quite understands what that means, right? Okay, and they don't want that, because if they do, there was actually a class war. G. Edward Griffin would be killed alongside Klaus Schwab. If there was this violent revolution,
yeah,
that we're coming for both of you, I'm afraid. And tough. It doesn't make any sense at all. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to tie in the minds of the viewer or listener or whatever that race, anything to do with pushing race, is to do with class war. Class war is a communist thing. I've heard that trope before. Therefore, it's good to be racist, which is really what that is the dog whistle.
Again, it's the way this film positions itself is interesting, because it kind of uses this idea about racism, being manipulated and being the next step to part of the kind of communist control. And again, because the way this film is established, the way it's kind of angled itself, how it's used immigrant voices and the way it's used multi-ethnic kind of faces and not kind of explored immigration. Again, it uses a black man and woman to critique BLM. So it's made some very choice decisions. This film has. It knows exactly who it's dog whistling to. And weirdly, there's probably like Nazis and white supremacists who, like, their critique of Plandemic 3 is it's just a bit too liberal.
Too many black people.
Yeah, it's too liberal. It's too nice. It's like, there's good info, but they just don't, it's too welcoming.
No, they've insulated themselves, or they've tried to insulate themselves from sort of the criticism that should be sort of obvious to most people watching it. But they then talk about woke as weaponizing compassion to make you hate people, which is nonsense, because being woke, as they speak about, is just common decency, essentially. And they misunderstand the point that basically the wokeism is a response to oppression. Like, even in the most in the original understanding of awake woke to the oppression that is placed on certain individuals in society, usually by the government or government systems, which they apparently don't like. They don't like big government, which is, again, the massive contradictions in this whole nonsense.
And it's really weird that the film's called The Great Awakening. Yeah. Awakening means being woke. You awaken and you're woke. So
they make the distinction awake, not woke, because basically what happened was woke was originally woke. The problem is, very succinctly, the problem is that woke has got associations with anti-racism. And a lot of people really, really like to be racist. And so they don't want to be considered woke. And that is why they don't like it, and why they're trying to position it as some sort of Marxist communist plot or whatever, like cultural Marxism and stuff like that. Because essentially it's calling them out for being racist. It's as simple as that.
Can I just also add, at this point in the film, this is when Zuby appears as an expert. He's listed as an author stroke podcaster.
Fucking hell.
I think there was, who was it? The Quack brothers, who are entrepreneurs stroke podcasters. I mean, look, if you want an intellectual documentary exploring totalitarianism, the state, authority, you got to really start questioning the level of that documentary when some of the experts
Zuby.
on it are Zuby, no criticism of him personally, but when it's podcasters and it's like, it's questionable.
Hey, what are you trying to say, man?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Forgive me, guys. No, but you get experts on it. This film doesn't. There's no real, because it's anti-experts, it's anti-intellectual, it's anti-science.
It's that thing again of being like for the working class, for the common man or whatever.
And just the other thing I forgot was just what was really interesting was much earlier on was how they used Robert Malone. The first time Robert Malone appeared in this documentary didn't mention vaccines. It was about the freezing of the bank accounts of the Canadian trucking convoys. So it's just weird. It kind of places him almost as an expert talking about politics. So this film again is very manipulative
Absolutely.
about the people it interviews, the platform it gives, and how it sets them up as being some kind of authority on subjects.
Fun fact about Robert Malone: he invented this podcast.
Then he goes on to completely misrepresent critical race theory as being designed to teach people to hate white people, which it really, really isn't. Like, critical race theory it's not even a big deal. It's basically, and it's social. What's the word? Sociology in its most basic form. It's literally like lower sixth level stuff. It's like, hey, have you noticed that certain people have certain prejudices unfairly leveled against them as society? It doesn't mean that basically, like, you know, you didn't have it hard. It's just saying, have you understood the perspective of other people and considered the things that they would have to deal with, in the same way that you have got unique things that you will have to deal with that they won't understand. They have got their own lives to live, and they kind of show this because there's some black guy comes on and basically says, I have 2 PhDs, how am I oppressed? And they think that this is a slam dunk, right? And this is actually very telling, because this is why critical race theory would be very, very important and useful to this gentleman. Because there are certain swathes of society that do not care how many PhDs that you've got or how much money in the bank you have. To them, you are a black man first, and that is all you are. And you are worthless regardless of your PhDs because of their preconceived and false ideas about black people. And that is why critical race theory is vital. And it blows my mind that such a stupid point is put across like that. But again, you know, also,
it's not the first time
no,
a
it's not
stupid
the
point's been made in this film. Let's be honest.
Also, shouldn't they hate him because he's got 2 PhDs and therefore he's like he's intelligent?
He's too intellectual.
Yeah. He then says some politician called Mr. Hawley talking about all these horrible laws designed to stop people complaining about critical race theory, and he says that basically something like making annoying phone calls or even using the internet in a way that causes emotional distress would be considered a felony under these new critical race theory laws. So anyway, I looked these laws up. That's not true. The first one is about repeated harassing phone calls, okay, which is standard. That's absolutely what you would do. The second one says the course of conduct that places the victim in reasonable fear of death or causes substantial emotional distress. So it's fair to say that he's completely misrepresented that. Just doing something on the internet wouldn't fall under these new laws. Doing something on the internet that caused a group of people to go round to your house and kill you would. And you know what? Call me an old lefty, but I actually agree with that, to be quite honest. They then start to go on about utter bullshit that, like, saying the words father are being phased out, and the use of the word woman is being phased out, and this is nonsense, right? Okay, this is an argument.
This is why he put it in the occupations.
Oh, is it? Like,
that's got to be in it.
Yeah, like, it's just
that's why he describes people as father all the time.
Oh, I see. Yeah, no, yes, absolutely, yes, good point. Like, it's not true, right? Okay, this is another one of these misrepresentations of the culture wars, right? There's this describe what a woman is, and what they don't tell you is that there's 2 descriptions of a woman. There's the legal description and there's the biological description, and those are slightly different, essentially. Like, I'm not even going to bother because I'll get it wrong. Like, but there is a distinction, and this is to incorporate people that have transitioned. And it's just one of these ridiculous, silly, stupid, anti-trans, anti-woke arguments that just don't actually hold any weight once you actually sort of like look at them with any degree of scrutiny. But apparently, according to the documentary, all of this stuff, it's anti-family, isn't it? That's what it's about. It's anti-family, and then they do the obvious lying about kids transitioning behind their parents' back. because some school person, and this is again not true. There are certain times where somebody that has got some concerns that they may be LGBT of any iteration might speak to a teacher because they don't feel that the atmosphere at home is conducive to them having this conversation. We still live in an age where people will get kicked out for being gay. I know, it's crazy. But, like, you know, Small Town Boy, which was, you know, that's what the song is about. I know that's 30, 40 years old now, but it still happens today. And so there are circumstances where basically, like, a teacher would be solace for these people. And in those circumstances, they aren't obliged to tell the parents, particularly in times where that could cause problems for the child, like that their family would murder them, like, or something like that, because they're violently opposed to gay people, or they would send them away to pray the gay away, something like that. Okay, and that's perfectly legitimate. But what they're trying to frame this is that basically you can have a whim on a Tuesday, and by Thursday you get in prepped and pre-ops so that you can go and transition, and you turn up Friday as a completely different person, and your parents won't have a say. And this is bullshit on a number of levels, because basically the hoops that you have to go through to actually transition is surprising. It's not nearly as straightforward as people make it out to be. And again, it's just all nonsense, just bigoted rubbish that it's beneath people, really. It's embarrassing that we're like grown-ups act like this, but this is how they do. They then, can you believe, misrepresent Marx again. They say that Marx wanted to abolish the family. And again, this doesn't mean getting rid of families. It doesn't mean not having a mum and dad and brothers and sisters. What Marx was talking about was making society more caring and communal, so that the family isn't the only refuge that you have from society. So what this would be like is like, if you live on an estate or in a village, and if your mum's not home, you can go round to Auntie Pauline's, who's not really your auntie, she's just your next door neighbour. And if Auntie Pauline's not in, you can go and see Uncle Howard at the other end, because basically everybody knows each other and you're like a massive extended family. So that was what Marx was talking about, which 9 times out of 10, MAGA lot and far right people actually won. That's the sort of the irony. I suppose this is horseshoe theory in to a degree. But when it's framed like this, they will rally against it like Nuremberg. Anyway,
I also find this really funny, right? Because there seems to be, Christians pushing this thing, and they must have never read Acts, because that's exactly what the first followers of Christ were doing. They were a commune, you know what I mean? But like, hey, read the book of Acts.
This is what's so strange about this particular iteration of Christian-based ideology, because it's anti-Christian to my take, with my limited knowledge of it. Like, it must be so frustrating, but hey-ho. So they then go on to say that basically BLM want to disrupt the nuclear family. And they then go on to say that all totalitarian regimes destroy the family, and that's just not true. Like, in fact, the Nazis massively encouraged families, white families, like, certainly, but they were very keen on. They had fucking joy divisions, Lebensraum. There was whole ideological positions that led to wars based on increasing the number of Germans in families, right? So again, this is just a poorly researched and shit documentary, essentially.
And there's another thing that, like, they're missing here, like this promotion of, say, different types of families or whatever, is to make people feel like included and not feel like just because I haven't got a dad doesn't mean I don't come from a family.
Yeah.
Just because I'm raised by a single dad doesn't mean I don't have a family. You know, or I don't have brothers. Just because I'm not from a 2.4 children house doesn't mean I'm not a valid member of society.
Exactly. But this is the point, and this is what's so just disgusting about everything that they're really going on about. They then rant about masculinity, how it's always being attacked, apparently. And then they pivot back to the BLM founder was a Marxist. Now, kind of. Patrice Cullors and Alicia Garza, basically, Patrice Cullors described themselves as trained Marxists. But the group isn't, because it supports LGBTQ, which Marxist countries usually don't. So the group isn't Marxist at all. And who cares what their position? I thought we were into individuals, but apparently not, like when they think something different. Yeah. They then they go back to saying that China's really scary, but actually we should be more scared of what's within the USA. So this is harking back to the gangster Edward Griffin's idea of this communist takeover from within, like Reds under the bed. It literally is a hark back to 1958 and then 1960s and stuff like that, and McCarthyism. And, McCarthy's assistant at the time was Roy Cohn. Roy Cohn was the mentor to Donald Trump. Roy Cohn also got an illegal supply of AZT when he contracted AIDS because he was secretly gay. Then, for no apparent reason, they start going on about how the Revolutionary War and the American Civil War were definitely not about slavery, and the USA is definitely not and have never been racist, both of which are completely not true. I mean, yeah, sure, like the Civil War was not just about slavery. There were other aspects in, but it was mostly and mainly about slavery, and the reduction of taking away slaves from the South would have basically ruined their economy. They weren't really keen on that. That doesn't necessarily mean that people in the North actually cared about slaves, but again, this is a very strange position to be taking for this documentary. It almost seems to be saying, if you were suspicious and cynical, you'd be saying, particularly with all these things, that these people are nasty, horrible, bigoted racists that are just looking to sort of justify their position in some way. And then the rest of the film is really basically them just saying things that Marxists are going to destroy, that we should be really frightened of all sorts of things. World War III might be coming. And essentially they talk about the idea that chronic fear is a way to keep people in control and stop people critically thinking, which is ironic because that's exactly what this documentary is doing.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was going to say, it goes into a whole moment where it does like America in Crisis, and it's just all in a cut, and it uses like Greta Thunberg with like this like a quote from her and like this really ominous music. And it's just ironic that the whole film talks about the psychology of fear, yet uses all the devices to create fear itself. It's not self-aware.
No, it then says that the COVID restrictions were tyranny and incentives to vaccinate are tyrannical. So, like if you go to you get your vaccination here, give you a voucher to get a free Big Mac, that's tyranny, apparently. And it's like, it's not tyranny, is it? Like, tyranny is people being run over in the streets for tanks and things like that. Tyranny is like, journalists getting thrown out of fucking windows for like writing things that oppose the government.
It's not getting donuts for a vaccine.
No, it's not getting donuts, is it? Like, you incredibly massive fannies. Like, if you think that's tyranny, like, you will fucking never survive when the New World Order actually arrives. That's the thing that gets me. All these fucking preppers and stuff. I want to live in a forest, in a hut on my own. You have to spend 2 weeks inside. I can't take it anymore. I can't sit here and watch Netflix for 2 weeks.
You think they would have been like, yeah, I've been prepared for this. I can do this.
Yeah. No, apparently not. Ridiculous.
It is just so weird the way it just like uses these like, certainly like very ludicrous moments of like donuts for vaccination or fast food or even a brothel for like vaccination. Again, they're ludicrous. They're over the top. Are they totalitarian? Not at all.
Not really,
Then this is just to get manipulating.
Yeah,
things that were, and it does this like this. They were ludicrous.
Yeah,
and it uses it for like a scary means. It did it earlier as well, right at the start of the film where it talks about the communist plot. It uses like just a small demonstration. There's clearly just some students in America, and it's like, ooh, shock horror. There's left-wing students who go on demonstrations. Like, that is just, again, really, like, quite common. That's actually not scary. That's called freedom to actually, if you've got an opinion, you can go out in the streets and demonstrate. And, you know, in a liberal democracy, you could say, actually, you tolerate and allow, and that happens. But yeah.
But that's the crux of the film, though. At the end of the day,
Yeah.
it's the crux of it. Like, they don't want a liberal democracy.
No, they don't at all. They want this constitutional republic where rich white men make the rules and everybody sticks to it. And if you can't cope, that's your fault. Like, it's a horrible, horrible system, actually. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, the fact that they're sort of like trying to portray this as in any way good for families and stuff, it's like, no, it's appalling. Like, I don't understand it, really, to be quite honest. They then say that science is becoming a new religion, which means that they don't understand science or religion, basically, because, you know, science tends to rely on repeatable facts and religion tends to rely on faith. Like, that's sort of the sort of central tenets of both of them, and they tend to be the opposite. I was very much reminded of but what about the Babel fish? That's a dead giveaway, isn't it? It couldn't have evolved naturally, and so it proves you exist. QED. By your own logic, you can't exist. Oh, I didn't think of that, says God. And vanished to the public logic. Anyway, so the rest of the film is basically like G. Edward Griffin saying the solution is whatever you do, do it now, which kind of sounds like a veiled sort of like incitement to violence, but doesn't actually give you any clear instructions on what to do, but you should be doing it immediately, basically. So good for him.
But Neil, please don't skip over the most monumental moment of the film, which is when we see this guy suddenly appear as an old man. Like, we saw these clips of him, G. Edward Griffin, as a young man, and suddenly it's like, bang, he's alive, he's still here. And he's like, Mikki Willis was like, so how does it feel to be right about everything?
Everything.
And,
yeah. This is all, we're seeing everything that I've talked about now for years, and it's like, where is this thing? like, and what he's saying is basically, it's really sad, really, because he's an old racist white man that's saying, there's foreigners and gay people and women in powerful positions and people of colour everywhere, and I hate it. I just hate it. And that's the message of the film, and it's just miserable, isn't it?
He has his own hero's journey as well, because it goes into his past.
Yeah.
He talks about how he was this insurance man. He started hanging out with all these hippies and communists, and suddenly he has this moment of almost like enlightenment. And I think he describes himself then as a crusader. There is a war for our minds, and the enemy is collectivism. So again, like, his hero's journey is almost planted as now this is kind of the bit where we move into the third act, and now it's all like, how can we all fix this?
Gotta say, though, it does look good for like 94.
Yeah, he looks cracking, isn't he? Yeah.
He's not been drinking fluoride water, that's why.
No, there you go. Yeah, absolutely. Maybe he's onto something.
You know?
So he's basically like, the last 20 minutes is basically like tedious talking heads and like just various different twats being wise and spiritual. And then G. Edward Griffin says that voting is worthless, and the answer is to get into grassroots politics, which seemed to me to be somewhat contradictory. And also pointless, and also one of those things where, like, you're 94. How long? Like, what? And also, that's bollocks, because they've got Donald Trump they had Donald Trump as a president, which, you know, basically enacted a lot of the things that the John Birch Society actually wanted to happen, basically. So
I think this whole third act is really surreal, because it's kind of sets up with a question of like, well, how do we fix this? What's the solution? And it's a complete muddle of contradictions. Like, you know, it makes a point that we are all fighting each other and we should be coming together. And it's like, wait a minute, have you not just been criticising?
Are you fucking serious? You've just like spent spent an hour and 40 minutes telling how everybody's an evil bastard that is ultimately going to undermine the USA by being a secret communist, and how they shouldn't be allowed to exist. But what we really need right now is unity. And it's like, are you mad?
This is a quote. Someone says, we should work together to solve these problems. And it's like, again, it's absolute contradiction. I think the greatest one, though, in this moment for me is Robert Malone, where he says, "Don't listen to the fear porn."
Fucking
And it's, and he's built a career on and has taken part in a 90-minute film that is quite literally fear porn.
The third.
The third in the series, yeah.
Fear porn the third.
And then it winds to an end with one of the most two ridiculous things. One, G. Edward Griffin does the whole frog boiling in a pot thing, which has been a trope of the conspiracy world for ages, that basically they put a frog in a boiling water, it'll get out and go, ah. If you put it in water and slowly heat it up, it will stay in there until it boils to death. And this is essentially what the concept of the New World Order is based on, this inch by inch, this totalitarian tiptoe, as David Icke calls it. And the problem, and the main problem with this, is that it's bollocks. Frogs aren't stupid. You know, if it gets too hot, they'll get out. You know, like you would in a bath.
Yeah.
Right? So the problem is that this metaphor isn't grounded in reality, which is possibly why it's perfect for a lot of conspiracy theories. But then they go on to say, this is how they finish the film. They say that communism is a dreadful thing. It's happening worldwide. It isn't. But essentially the reason that there's so many immigrants coming to the United States is because they're trying to escape communism. And that had me thinking, like, can you imagine being an immigrant, going through all the hardships and perils and stuff like that, nearly dying, getting your family away from this terrible oppressive regime into America, only to discover that it's been taken over by a communist plot from within? You'd be fucking gutted. You'd be absolutely just livid, wouldn't you? Like, and that's who I feel for the most. These immigrants that are fleeing communism only to arrive in horrible communist America.
For me, one of the closing line where it says, "This glorious land, our land, that with God's help we shall preserve." I was like, that sounds like a dictator. It's the most scary, ominous line ever.
That's what's so crackers about it, yeah. But this is the thing, it's like, yeah, they are actually advocating a far more oppressive regime than most certainly than socialism, possibly than most communist regimes, to be quite honest. Like, and they either seem completely unaware of it, or, and this is potentially more frightening, they're completely aware of it. And so they've couched the way that they would let you in on this.
The other thing, you just reminded me, like, they're acting like the children are brainwashed in China, to worship the state. Well, do you know what happens when you start school in the morning in America? You all turn to the corner of the room, and you put your hand on your heart and say the Pledge of Allegiance to the American flag.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, like, that's the same damn shit. It's the same brainwashing crap. I grew up with that my entire life, having to do that every day. You know? It's the same thing. What are they talking about?
It's extreme nationalism, isn't it? That's the mechanism that sort of like, and what's ironic is that's collectivism, which apparently they would be rallying against, and like, but they wouldn't know that because they don't go to school, because they don't trust the education system. Yeah. So they'd be appalled. They do what? They have to pledge the allegiance. I kind of like it, but it's actually fundamentally against everything that we stand for. Shit. Like, no. So tell us who that woman was then, Ben. The woman that promised she wasn't political.
We promised to bring this back up, right? The lady, the very end, very tear-jerking story about, probably escaping a terrible existence, Maoist China, right? She said people in her village were, eating each other. There was cannibalism and all this kind of stuff going. So, of course, that's a terrible thing to, have to live through, and I could see why you would obviously want to escape. But yeah, Lily Tang Williams is who this lady was, and at no point did it say who she actually was.
Who is she, Brent? Is she non-political, like she said?
She says she's not political. However, in 2016, she ran for the Libertarian Party to be a Senate. She ran to be a senator for the Libertarian Party in 2016. In 2018 or 2019, she was invited to speak at the Heritage Foundation.
You know, the Heritage Foundation, the think tank that was founded by the Koch brothers and people connected to Paul Weyrich that came up with the concept of cultural Marxism.
That's
the people that, that one.
Yeah, they're
she's not political.
No,
Greg.
She's not political.
In no way. She's not political.
And then this year, she's ditched the Libertarians, obviously, since she's got connected with the Heritage Foundation and that, and now she's running for Republican Senate this year.
But she's not political.
2024. But she's not political in any way, shape, or form. I'm not saying these things because I'm political. Well,
one of her political adverts, has her in full army fatigues, holding an M16, which again. It implies to me that she has certain political beliefs that maybe she was concealing from the audience of the documentary.
Greg, look at your WhatsApp.
Oh my God.
It's amazing. She stood there with a machine gun, wearing army boots and army trousers, and a rather fetching polo neck. She could be mistaken for a poet. And she's holding an M16 in front of her, superimposed onto an American flag. And it says, "I was once a slave before, and I will never be one again. Thank you for standing with me, Lily Tang Williams." Insane. Oh, hi, guys.
Yeah, not political. I was so annoyed. So annoyed. All the way through this film, though, is what I was doing the second time I was watching it last night. And to quote Greg, it doesn't get better the second time round.
Yeah, you don't discover more with the second viewing, I assure you.
Each person that I didn't know, obviously we had Robert Malone, we had Del Bigtree, we had Zuby, we had all these other people, and then there was people that I had never seen before, so I thought, okay, let's search their Twitter straight away, let's figure out who they are. Every single one had anti-vax comments.
Well, yeah. If I'd have come to it dry, if I'd have stumbled across it, I think I'd have been as cross as you. But I think that sort of insulated me from it because you were so furious by it. I was like, okay, what the fuck is this going to be? So when I watched it, I was more like...
I said, put all your sharp objects in a drawer because you might be tempted to throw stuff at the telly.
I mean, I did get angry, initially... And I did get really cross at the sort of, it did wind me up because it's just overtly racist and just bigoted and hateful and stuff like that. But at the same time, about 5 minutes into it, I was furious at the anti-welfare stuff. But then when Gangster Edward Griffin came on, it was I went, oh, it's this shit. They're going to do the anti-communism stuff, aren't they? And so I found it a little bit more ridiculous than anger making, but actually at the same time there were bits that were sort of it's beyond the pale. But dreadful film, dreadful message, not factually accurate, manipulative to the point where it was obvious, which is so it fails in what it's trying to do. It was essentially propaganda, but it wasn't very good propaganda. What did you think, Greg?
I just viewed this film, like I say, through the Chris Morris lens. I viewed it almost as a satire. I thought it was a joke because it was so ludicrous. And it just goes to show, if something calls itself a documentary, again, as all good critical thinking should do, we should question and explore that, because all film is constructed and is a manipulating interpretation and emotion. And this film does it through and through. And the irony that it uses terms like fear porn And that is what this film is all fear porn.
I just want to end this with, I'm sorry, Neil, but I'm going to play your voice notes.
Okay. So me, dude, I'm watching this fucking Plandemic 3. 2 minutes and 30 seconds into it. And he's already done the fucking, like, it's all about fucking him. I can tell they've lied in the opening statement by saying, we're any political race or vaccine status, fuck you. And then he's just done this whole, I don't believe in welfare, the trap of welfare. I guarantee they're going to say they should abolish the welfare thing and they force people to get up off the fucking arse and get a job. Right? Rather than saying maybe the welfare system should give more money and help people out more. And then he's gone straight onto fucking AZT's deadly and Fauci pushed AZT. Oh, Jesus, wet, mate. I fucking know. I can't. It's on the third line. I'm already getting anti-commie vibes. They're going to say that welfare is communist and they've got fucking Edward Griffith. Jesus fucking Christ. Okay, there's a really fucking stupid bit, right? Okay, they're talking about how education is a system of government control, and so actually the intelligent people fall for the plots and blah, blah, blah. And the normal working class person who works with their hands, maybe in the fields or manual labour or something, they've got like a far greater connection to the earth, which is greatly ironic because that's sort of exactly what communist propaganda used to say about the workers in the fields and stuff like that. You know, this is when Stalin wasn't actually starving to death, mind. But anyway, Stalin also had roundups of intellectuals and doctors for this very same reason, basically. Well, not for the same reason, for the reason that they basically might see through his plot. So the opposite. So basically, this film, which is anti-communist, has said something that sounds almost exactly the same as Stalinistic communist practice. Right, the documentary is now saying that if you use fear, you can basically control people. Forgetting the aspect that this is the third film about how the fucking vaccine kills you. Are they real?
Brilliant.
Amazing.
Brilliant.
Yeah, all right. So it clearly rubbed me up the wrong way a little bit. Like, but yeah, it is a very, very stupid film.